first step to make your project, the keychain, is you need to acquire some of this aluminum flat bar. I'll show you where that's located if you don't know where it is already. You also need a Sharpie and a tape measure. We're going to measure out from the very end, 4 inches in total, and mark it with a Sharpie. And you don't need to draw a line the whole way across. We're just focused on drawing a line at the very top. So about right here in this area. So the next step, you come over to a vise, and I suggest you use a vise that has jaws that have wood on the inside to protect your metal. We're going to take it and take a look at where we made our mark at 4 inches. Remember, 4 inches, not 6 or anything else. And we're going to put it inside the vise. Make sure we have about 1 inch sticking out. A common problem, people put it so their piece of metal is sticking out way too far. And when they try to cut, this piece of metal starts to flex back and forth. So just at the very edge. Tighten it down. And then we're going to be using a tool inside the tool cabinet called a hacksaw. So it's this guy right here. So this guy would be considered a hacksaw. It's kept inside the tool cabinet right behind us on the right hand side. Notice how all of them are hanging up. So let's head back to our area here. So the first thing, after you get everything clamped down, put your thumb right next to that mark, and our thumb's going to act like a guide. We're going to put it right next to the mark. Take our saw, put it right next to our thumb, and we're not going to get hurt because our thumb's right next to the blade, and just start sawing back and forth. And when you're doing this, you're not pressing hard, you're letting the weight of the saw blade do all the work for you. And you'll cut back and forth until you go the whole way through your piece of metal. It's also helpful if you take your hand, put it out on the end, and just hold it so it doesn't flex back and forth. For the next step, you're going to head over to the belt sander. And remember, we only use these belt sanders for metal and metal alone. It'd also be helpful if you have a pair of gloves, that way you don't get, this metal likes to heat up very quickly. Since it's made out of aluminum, we don't want you to get burned too easily, or burned at all, I should say. Our goal is we want to take these corners and these ends and make it so it's a half circle, round it over. Turn the machine on, and just slowly start to sand. Make sure you never hold your piece of metal up here at an angle, always flat on the ground, or I should say flat on the table. Move it back and forth. Every now and then take a break and dip it in over here in this area where you see the bucket full of water to cool it down. So when you're done, you should have 2 pieces, or I should say 2 sides that look just like this. We have that half circle that's formed on this side, and flip it over the other side as well. So the next thing we want to do is get rid of these sharp edges and little burrs that you can see right there at the tip of my finger. We're going to take a file and try to get rid of those little edges, and they should be showing up. Well, they probably will show up on both sides. So take a file, and we're going to file those little guys down, just like this. Just hold it at an angle, and just start to file away. And it shouldn't take too long, and they should come right off fairly easily. Just like that. Do both sides. So for this next part, what we want to do is drill a hole for the keychain part. That way it can like loop through, and you have something to hook onto. So you're going to need a few different things. A quick hook clamp, which you guys should already know where these are for your one project, the catapult project. You're also going to need one of these metal center punches, a hammer, a drilling board, and a drill with the drill bits that you used to pre-drill for your screws that went into your catapult projects. And by the way, inside of this metalworking cabinet, to the right here, that's where I keep the center punches. And notice that they're made entirely out of metal and don't have a wooden handle. That's the ones we prefer to use. Just to give you an idea where the drilling boards are, that way we don't drill into the table, so I'll just give you a quick view around where we are located in the room. The drilling boards are inside of this little cabinet table on the very bottom right, so right here in this area. So if you open up the drawer, the boards that you need will be inside. So before you drill, you always want to make sure that you center punch first. It doesn't matter if you're doing it within wood or metal. And we're going to be using, since we're dealing with metal, an all metal center punch. It looks just like this. Put it right where you want to make your little indent. Hold it nice and still. We're going to take a hammer and hit it with a nice solid blow at the very top, just like that. What it does is it leaves a small little dent right there. That way the drill bit can go directly into the top in that area. Next step, it's important, like I said earlier, that you're drilling on top of a board. That way you're not drilling into my table. And of course, with anything, especially metal and wood, you gotta make sure you clamp down whatever you're drilling into, or else this thing will spin in a circle and it's just not safe. We're gonna use a quick grip clamp, and just a quick review of how you use one of these guys. It rides along a bar, there's an end that stays in place, it's stationary, and this end moves back and forth. To release it, you press and hold on this small little black lever and you can go back and forth. But as soon as you let it go, you can't go like in the opposite direction of that little end there. You can only go forward. And then once you get to the back of the area where you're happy with where the location of where it is, and you want to tighten it down even more, you squeeze this trigger and it closes the jaws. So we're going to open it up, clamp it down, nice and tight, that way it doesn't go anywhere. Now we're going to be using a drill. So make sure that your drill has the proper bit chucked up to it. It's just the same drill bit we've been using to pre-drill for our catapult project. So no drill bits that are different. At the very top, you should be on speed setting number 2. On the right hand side, there's like a little arrow indented that should be pressed in. That way this is going forward. We're gonna put our drill on the very top of our piece of metal, just like this. And we're gonna drill through to the other side. Make sure it's nice and straight up and down. Apply pressure, and by that I mean you're pushing down, and squeeze the trigger at the same time. So for the next step, I'm not sure if you can see right at my, like the tip of my thumb, there's these like little burrs left over. It's like little metal that came out through the other side that's kind of sticking out, and that's not exactly safe, and your fingers can catch on it and it can rip your clothes if you're not careful. What we want to do is we want to take that and smooth it out, and for that we're going to be using a file. So take your file and just very carefully try to sand away or file away that small little burr. And make sure you do both sides. Flip it over and do the other side. So once you're done, you're gonna have something that looks like this. Now, unfortunately, what happens is you can see just by looking at the screen that we have these scratches that are left over. And what we want to do is get rid of those scratches that were left over with the file. And we're gonna be using something called emery cloth or emery paper. Basically, it's sandpaper for metal. And we're just gonna focus just in this small area right here. So take it, make it in a little pouch, and it's in the bottom right or bottom left corner of the metal tool cabinet behind us. We're gonna sand back and forth and try to do our best to get rid of those. And sometimes it might be a good idea to just go in a circle and try to focus your work or your sanding in this one small area here. So right there you can see we got rid of most of those scratches. Now they're still a little bit visible, but they will disappear through this next process where we're gonna head over to the buffing machine. Next thing you wanna do after you clean up all these burrs and everything is, I'm not sure if you can see, but our metal's kind of shiny, but over time what happens to most metals, if it's steel it rusts, if it's aluminum it'll corrode and oxidize. So it has kind of like this like dull like shine to it. We want to kind of clean that up a little bit more. We're going to be using a little bit of steel wool, which this is what steel wool looks like. It's in the cabinet behind me where the wood or the metalworking stuff is kept. We're just going to take the steel wool, move it back and forth, and try to get rid of most of that corrosion and like that nasty stuff that's left over. Basically, this is just another type of like sanding. It's a sanding process. Make sure when you're doing this, you get all of your sides covered. You want to do like the top, the bottom, the ends, the edges, everything. And there will be a huge like visual difference where you did do this and where you didn't. So I'm not sure if you can kind of see right now, it's a lot shinier than it used to be. So this machine right here in front of us is called the buffing machine. It kind of looks like a sander in a way, but it's a little bit different. First thing on this is it's kind of dark. It's enclosed. It's enclosed because we have these two wheels that are made out of cloth on either side that rotate at very high speed to help enclose everything and keep it safe. So to kind of like brighten up the area, might it be a good idea to turn this lamp off, and you can move it back or forth depending on which location you're going to be at. For this little part, we're going to be focusing on the left of this machine. The on or off switch is at the very top of the machine. So with this machine, guys and girls, I'd highly suggest that before you start using it, it's a good idea to get on a pair of gloves. This machine's not going to hurt you, but in case it does touch you, we don't want your hands to get, one, dirty, and two, it might take off maybe like a few hairs, but it's not going to hurt you. It's made out of cloth. We just like to be safe in general. So we're going to take our metal, hold it just like this in our hand, and we're just going to work from the front to the back and pull it towards ourselves. And the goal of this is, basically buffing is like a process of sanding. It sands at a very small and microscopic level, and it's going to make our metal nice and shiny to the point where it almost looks like chrome. It makes it super shiny. The more time you spend on this machine, the shinier a piece of metal is going to get. So just after a matter of like a couple seconds, you can see a huge visual like difference, like it's almost like a mirror finish between what we did and what we did not do. So we want to go through and we want to buff this entire thing. Make sure you do all of your edges. The only thing we don't really focus on is the ends that much, but you can get just the ends of it a little bit, and all the faces. Don't worry about the whole. After you're completely done buffing, you're going to see there's kind of like some smudge marks from the buffing compound that are left over. In order to clean that up and just wipe it down below this machine, there's usually like a buffing rag, just to wipe off like the excess. So take the buffing rag, just move it back and forth, and that'll take the majority of like the dirt and grime off that were left over. So the next step, we really want to personalize your project, and you can put on this keychain just about anything you want. So as long as it's school appropriate. So if you're into like a favorite video game or like music or something, or maybe you want to put your name on it, or maybe it's a gift for someone else, you can do that. Just keep in mind how much space this is going to be using up. And there's also a front side and a back side. So for me, I'm going to just put my last name on one side. And we're going to be using a couple different things. I have stamps that are available for your use. You're going to have to use a hammer with those. I also have a electric engraver you can use as well. I'll show you how to use that later. So one thing I'm going to mention is where these things are located. So the stamps themselves, they're located in the right-hand cabinet on the very bottom right. So right in this location, right there. As far as where the engravers are located, they're on the left side of the left cabinet, right there in the middle of the screen on this shelf, right here, okay? So just keep in mind when you're using the stamps as one really important piece of information. If you want to use the stamp the right way, and they're all in alphabetical order by the way, make sure you put them back accordingly. If you want to use one the right way without it being sideways or backwards or whatever direction it shouldn't be, this one piece of information is very important. If you take a look at the stamp, of course, on the very bottom, there's going to be like where the little impression is of whatever design or symbol. The other side, it's going to be slightly rounded. This is where we strike it with a hammer. And if you look at this, there's 4 different sides. On the one side, there's a groove right here near my thumb. That groove always has to be facing towards us if we want our letter, number, whatever it is, facing the right way. So just keep that in mind. So make sure you hold it the right direction. Make sure that notch is facing towards you. We're going to take the hammer, line everything up, try to keep it nice and straight, and strike the top with a nice solid, like, heavy hit. Don't be really light with it or else you'll have to do this multiple times. Look directly at the top and hit it once. And what it does, it leaves a nice solid dent or impression on the very bottom. Next thing we're going to be focusing on is the electric engraver. I showed you where that was earlier. Here's the engraver itself, and you have to plug it into an electrical source. A couple things about this. You basically hold it like a pencil after you turn it on, and you just draw whatever design or symbol or whatever it is that you want. So you're basically freehanding everything. There's a couple settings on this side. It's like a turn dial. The lowest setting is 1. If it's at 1, it's going to give like a light, very light engraving, like scratch. The whole way up to 5, it's going to be very deep, and it's going to shake a lot more. Usually I keep it at like a solid 3. That gives you a nice little like indent. On the very back is your on-off switch. So if you take a quick look, basically it just like carves right beneath like the initial layer and carves into your metal. So you can make whatever design, or like if you want to put your name in a different like font or cursive or something cool like that, you can do that as well. The very last step is we want to make like a little like hanger, like a string to go through it. So we're going to be using fishing line, so that way we can have this thing be like a true blue keychain. Take some fishing line, and we're going to measure this out to being 6 inches in length. We can use a tape measure. It doesn't have to be perfect. Hold it at the ends, and it looks like 6 inches is about right here. And we're going to make our cut with a pair of scissors. And your last and final step, you'll take your fishing line and you're going to thread it through the hole, like so. Then we're going to take the two ends, meet them up against each other just like this, and we're going to tie a knot. Just loop it around, like so. Carefully pull it through the other side. And then once you get here to the end, pull it nice and tight. And there you have it. You have yourself a nice little keychain.